Alright everyone, hello and welcome to AirMech Talk. My name is RUY and I'm your host for today. Actually, I'm your host for every day for these little discussion sessions that we've been having. Today we have some new panelists in Carbon Smash, one of the Carbon developers, also known as Stuart, and the Big Boss, a longtime player and a recent streamer. So we're just going to do some quick introductions for Carbon Smash. Also, Stu, have at it. Oh, one sec. One sec. Okay, my bad, sorry. Okay, go ahead.
Yo, this is Smash, community developer at Carbon Games. I focus mainly in QA and community. Yeah, it's my first week on here. Should be pretty fun. My main mechs are Striker, Helix, Paladin, the basic stuff. Not totally talking about yet today specifically, but I'll definitely be involved in all the conversation as much as I can. Might have to leave a little bit early, but figure it out. So yeah, glad to be here.
Alright, thanks a lot, Smash. And the Big Boss, why don't you go ahead and tell everyone who you are?
I'm the Big Boss. I joined about 363 days ago to AirMech, so just coming up on a year. I've kind of been sticking to a lot of PvP, about 1,000+ games played, so a lot of that. Mech history, I've traditionally kind of always just played whatever allows me to win games. My first 300 games I probably played about with Osprey, but other than that, it's been kind of all over the place.
Wow, really? You've been, Is there any mech that you haven't really mained at all?
I don't like Angel. I'm not a fan of that playstyle, so I've kind of generally avoided that. I'm not good at Neo, so I don't usually play that either.
I see. Okay. Well, we're just gonna dive into our first. Oh, I'm sorry. We do have our returning panelists, Frisky Cow and Insomniac 301. Hey guys.
What's up?
All right. So we're just gonna jump straight into our first topic, which is going to be the current state of the game. It's going to be just a general overview and basically what we personally would say is currently overpowered, underpowered, frequently used, what's popular, any issues that we see, anything that's very cool that we've noticed in the recent metagame or the game in general. So we're going to start off with the Big Boss. What's your opinion on whatever you've been noticing in the current game trends?
So the new advanced engine MK2 came out, and I really think that's pretty balanced. It has it feels excessive 30% respawn cost, but that actually kind of balances its really positive stats. So that was really nice to see in the new patch. Of course, there's still a lot of parts that really have that and the true negatives, but it still was really nice to see that new one. There's also the changes on Chasm, so that was moved the bridges, helps with pushes. I don't push a ton on Chasm, but it does help. I've tried it. It does. Previously, if you had to push, it was very sad the way your units would just get all messed up. It just wasn't working. So that improvement was really nice to see.
All right, and Smash, what have you noticed in lately in the game?
It's definitely changed with how people can't turtle as easily. Pitching has become a lot less micro-oriented, I guess, and you have less of a chance of just losing tons of units to people turtling constantly because of the formation changes, which is really awesome. Lately I've been looking at what I really want to do about how Mortys and Flamers are the new boomers, basically, because that's totally not their intention. I haven't exactly figured out which direction I want to head with that yet. Other than that, the big thing is parts, but like you said, we'll go into parts more next week, but that's the big thing that me and James have been talking about pretty heavily. I lean more towards having 0 negatives, where he wants negatives and positives. But yeah, that'll be discussed later. And yeah, that's pretty much where I'm sitting right now.
All right, thanks a lot, Smash. Frisky, do you want to add anything to what you've noticed since the last episode?
Definitely on board with using Mortys and Femurs as bombs. That's weird. It's getting increasingly popular. Also, Butcher is pretty awesome. He's rock. Is like an upgraded grinder almost. Just how you can spam them out. They do very good damage. Kind of tough to deal with by tank, but they can still be countered by anti-infantry things. So I feel like they're in a good spot. AI is kind of useless with artillery. They'll put it down and then forget it's there. So eventually, you just have like big row of 10 artillery facing the close outpost that you gotta reposition. But it's a good additive. And then the chasm bridge kind of disturbed me. Well, very gently, just because I use shooters a whole lot, and it messes with the AI of the shooters, where the bridges are no longer in line with the ramp down the hill from the forward outpost. So when you drop shooters on Y, they actually don't have an angle onto the neutral units. They actually have to go around the ridge, and then by the time they actually have a line of sight to the things that they can hit, they end up getting killed by the neutral T-99s. Which depresses me, because I can't just draw shooters and forget about them.
Yeah, that's a little bit weird. Maybe we can try to look into that, maybe suggest a slight pathing change, or not necessarily pathing change, but a slight change of the actual path itself. So, and saying you can do a little bit of tweaks. Yes, we are reading it, Annihilator. But everyone on stream can see the mumble chat, actually. So even though we can't necessarily pay attention to it or whatnot, or comment on it directly every single time, everyone can see it on stream. So that's the reason that the mumble chat exists, and I won't acknowledge that anymore since I said it once. All right, Insomniac, anything you want to add?
Well, obviously, I just want to tackle the Morty spam has been. It's proven interesting. Because it's such a durable unit, and yeah, people are using them as bombs and whatnot, but even if you remove that aspect, their AoE ability and their penetration, weapon penetration, is like 45, which is like equal to or slightly better than a Jackal. That on top of the fact that it's an AoE attack, they are very strong. So I've seen Morty spam used quite a lot, which increases the popularity of Striker. I see a lot more people using Striker because of the parts values with the flak ammo 4 and gun parts in Lexi or Frank. There's a lot more dogfighting I've noticed lately, where people are killing each other over outposts, especially in 1v1, but in team games as well. There's a lot more air combat going on. It's almost like the air combat that goes on when there's a mid-fight and there's artillery being microed around, but now we have less artillery and people are just doing more trying to get kills in the air. One other thing I wanted to add was that, what was it? Oh, the Flamers. Flamers are also being used as bombs because their damage on death is actually higher than Morty's. So I'm going to put that out there for people to abuse until it gets changed. Flamers deal more damage on death than Mortys.
Yeah, if everyone
dirty person.
If anyone's not aware that Mortys and Flamers both have damage on death, so they're very similar in function to Boomer, with it, in addition to their clear, obvious function. How much damage Annihilator? It's significant. It's comparable to Boomer's, and it's guaranteed. And I think actually their damage on death is more than the Boomer's damage on death, which is a little hilarious. So we're just going to... I just want to quickly cover... has anyone been using the Butcher at all, which is the new unit? Let me actually put that up on screen. Anyone? Anyone?
I have.
Yeah, it's pretty good. I wasn't really testing it fully before we put it out there, so I've been using it a lot lately. Just kind of seeing where it fits in exactly. I mean, it's pretty good. It's still not doing... It's basically not doing what Mortys are doing right now on drops in terms of what its like full purpose is. So I'm gonna have to either look at its damage or figure out exactly where its place is gonna sit.
Can I ask you, Smash?
I gotta ask you, Smash, real fast. Have they fixed the AI from Butcher and Asset now currently?
Well, they have in the manual build. So from what I see, it's fixed. But since it's not just like a little change, we have to actually push the functionality. So it'll be in the next Canary.
But it's in the dev build right now.
There was a bug where once you set assassins or not Mortys, assassins or butchers on attack on Y, you could not command switch them to anything else. You would have to actually pick them up and reset them.
Oh yeah, I told Ken about that the second whoever brought that up the first time. Because that I saw that and I was like, oh, that's really bad. Some random just a little bug that slipped under Ken's radar before I could look at it.
Can I quickly ask you, Smash, what maybe the original intent for the functionality of the Butcher would be? Was from the dev side?
Well, so what I like the way assassins were is it was the sense that they'd be a lighter unit, could deal higher damage to armored units, which James was like, no, that's totally not right. And so I was like, okay, well, then whatever. So he cut the damage, and then that's when assassins got nerfed just recently. And then he put in butchers, which he had originally intended to be that unit. So they're still a light unit in terms of cost, build time, and carry weight that will deal high damage to armored targets like tanks and AA, basically.
Okay, I like that. Its weapon is 55. Alright, so we're just gonna move on to the real... Well, I just want to finish up as much as we can the things that were included in the new patch. Big Boss, I know you play Osprey every once in a while. Have you tried Eva yet? The Big Boss, are you there?
Yes. Eva, I have not been... I mean, yes, I turned it on. I played probably 2 solo games with it. But because of its small stat, that plus 4% AirMech damage distance and plus 4% heal beam rate, I feel a lot of people like to stick to the pilots, and I know personally myself, give you much better increases, such as Mach, which gives you plus 30% energy efficiency as well as plus 15% damage distance. So I know me and a lot of people go for much bigger stat increases rather than something small as 4 and plus 4. So it just didn't feel to have such a big impact gameplay. I didn't really notice it.
I totally agree. I'm gonna say that anyone that is Osprey should actually look into Ava hard. I mean, it's something that she got in game, and I mean, we would like to have a tendency to put things in the game that aren't super overpowered, so it makes sense that she doesn't have over the top stats. But now's the time to actually like basically put in your input on where you want her to fit in.
I don't like her being like an Osprey exclusive mech. Like, oh, that healing rate is one of 2 positives. Like, what is in using Eva for any mech that's not Osprey? I mean, Aiden is the only one other pilot that comes to mind that, you know, you should really only use one mech.
People use it on more than one mech.
Yeah, Alien, they do. I mean, but looking at the positives and negatives without the Osprey specific positive, it's, you know, it's hard to justify using it with anything besides Osprey, just for a plus 4 damage resist and minus 3 airspeed with the other kind of more minor negatives. But yeah, that's one of the biggest reasons that Alien is used. So I'll just pop that up real quick on screen. So yeah, even without the abduct speed, you still got plus transform speed, ground speed, and airspeed with a semi-negligible damage resistance penalty. Anyone?
Yeah, I just want to say, I mean, the heal beam rate for the Osprey, I myself don't have a problem with the mech-specific pilots, but they do need to be a little more inclusive. But even as a mech-specific pilot, the heal beam rate is so low, and it only applies to the Osprey healing whatever it's healing. It doesn't apply for your repair units the way Kira does. And yeah, that divides people a bit, but right now the numbers are so low. on the pilot itself that it doesn't make it worth it. But they've, I think in the past 2 months, they released the Mark IV heal beam part for Osprey. So you can actually stack your heal beam rate really high, which means you can save a lot of units that are taking damage and out heal the damage that's coming in.
So in a stack, that plus 4% might be the difference between determining whether or not a unit lives or dies in that DPS fight.
Especially for Goliaths and Devastate.
But wouldn't Kira's bonus kind of affect units in the same way? Doesn't this bonus isn't it more conducive towards healing players as opposed to, like, because Kira gives you plus 25 repair rate on units regardless of the source. So the heal beam rate for Eva is inferior if you're healing units, right?
Actually,
no,
Kira...
you're absolutely right. It is way more mech on mech healing specific.
I don't think the Kira bonus affects mech to mech, does it?
No, Ava.
I don't think so.
The heal beam
Oh,
for
okay. Is
Ava.
that what you're saying? Okay. Oh, yeah, I forgot to tweet about this, damn it.
Yeah, so, like, I see a lot of... I'm hoping to see a lot of Saucer, Osprey, Hog, heavy hit combos moving out just with Eva to try and see if that's something that can be fun.
Okay, can I just mention one pilot that we've gotten recently?
Sure.
The Total Biscuit pilot. The stats, I can't remember all of them. One of them is the auto repair rate, and Osprey actually, with that auto repair ability where it reduces the amount of time before auto repair kicks in, and you can actually move while auto repair is working. You can stack points, auto repair, items, part ever, plus Total Biscuit. And with Osprey's ability, you get plus 81% auto repair rate.
Wow, that's actually pretty incredible. I have never considered that.
It's a survival Osprey build, sort of. The only thing holding it back, really, I feel like, is the fact that the auto repair rate takes a little too long to kick in to be as useful as it should be.
I think it's an interesting negative stat, the minus melee attack power, because you read all positives and you're like, oh man, I need to do this with Bomber. And you see the negative and you're like, oh gosh.
Yeah, well, that's a new stat. I was happy to see new stats on pilots.
Plus it has the negative 5% AO speed, and oftentimes any pilot that's going to have a negative AO is always going to be used a little bit less in high tier play.
I think you can use it more defensively, depending on how far you're typically going to stray from an outpost. Anyway, okay, so let's touch on the last couple items for the current patch. One thing that's actually gameplay specific that was affected, in the last patch there was a bug fix, or there was a bug and it just got fixed that you did not drop cargo when you ran out of fuel. And actually it was like that for a really long time ago. Then they changed it, and then it changed back because of a bug again, and then it changed back to what it is now, which is when you drop, or when you run out of energy, you drop whatever you have in cargo. So Insomniac, what do you think would be the pros and cons in terms of gameplay for each of those slightly different ways for the mechanic to work?
I feel like it's better off forcing people to drop stuff. Being able to carry something with no fuel at all feels like it just feels off for some reason, because if someone's carrying units and they're going to drop your fort and they get like halfway and they run out of fuel for some reason, they can just keep carrying that all the rest of the way if they don't get spotted on radar. I'd prefer it if the units had gotten dropped and you have to give them commands and then land and refuel or something.
Smash, you have any input?
Sorry, I was responding to the chat. What was the question?
No problem. It was about the bug fix that allows you to, or that forces you to drop your units when you run out of energy. And actually, it's been kind of back and forth in the past. So, what do you think would be sort of pros and cons gameplay wise for either way it works.
I like this now where you drop units simply for the fact that it just makes sense. Whether or not, I mean, it makes sense with how our current energy is basically handled functionality wise. Other than that, I mean, yeah, no. The way it is now, it makes sense to me for sure. The way it was previously would only be what I would consider a bug more than anything, though.
I like how it makes energy have a purpose. Like if you run out of energy, it'd be a bad thing, right? So I mean, you can't micro when you're out of energy. You can't run. You can't do anything.
The annoying thing I find is if I have full infantry like cargo and I run out of energy, I can't just immediately drop all 4 like I would if I had energy. If I run out of
I've already
energy,
brought that up like 3 times. That's like one of the main functionality thing I've pushed for is there's absolutely no reason that you can't drop all 4 at the same time if you want.
okay, that's a different topic than I'm sorry.
No, that's good. That's good.
But I mean, keep other people bringing it up gives me the more leeway, and he doesn't just think that I'm just being an annoying player or whatever.
So yeah, I guess the lesson is complain about everything that we think might be added into the game, and we can have it on record.
Ooh, can I interject a topic? I didn't bring it up earlier, but I just thought of it.
Okay, quickly.
Okay, just a short comment. If people didn't notice, you can now go negative with your credits when you die. And this is a big deal because of the way the point system works, and people were abusing it, where they would spend units up right before they die so they wouldn't actually have to pay any cost for dying.
Fortunately, that was on the topic list, and I was going to hit it next. Boss.
Damn.
You were going to say something, Boss?
This is huge, especially for like a paladin where you really are stacking all MK4 parts. My respawn time is at least probably 7 seconds longer. It feels like forever in 1v1 now when I play paladin.
And now you got a lot of negative credits. Actually, I just want to mention that before I don't know why no one brought this up. I probably should have when they were talking about it, but previously, to the way that it worked now, or it worked before this recent change, they didn't even let you respawn until you had enough credits in your bank. So you just sat there, not respawning until you could afford a respawn. So I guess theoretically, you could have continued spending your money on things to build and stuff, and just continually sat there in limbo until you eventually generated enough credits for the respawn. And I actually like that because it's an even further penalty for something that should have that penalty. Okay, guys, so let's move on to the first, solid non-weekly topic, and that's going to be the past mechanic regarding the fort weak spots. One of the first hidden mechanics that noobs learn from experienced players is the fort weak spot. Almost 1 year ago, the fortress weak spot changed from the front door to the corners, resulting in more opportunities to do increased damage when executing fort drops. After the armor system revamp earlier this year, the weak spots mechanic changed from double damage to reduced armor, further extending the range of droppable units to those with lighter weapons. What have these 2 changes have done for gameplay, particularly fort drop tactics, and what is your view of the fort weak spot mechanic in general, Insomniac?
Well, I have to say I do like the negative armor over the double damage mechanic. The only downside is some of those lights like Flamer, which are highly abusable on fort corners because of their burst, high damage, and low piercing. Are kind of almost bad manners at this point to do to people. But the bigger thing I want to mention is the change from the front door to the corners. That was a major change because before you had everyone would focus front door, front door, front door. Now it's basically micro around, play a little game of tank Tetris where your opponent's dropping tanks, you're blocking, they're moving them over a foot or bringing them around to another side. But you're vulnerable on all sides of your fortress to this increased damage. It's not just normal damage, it's increased damage from all sides, basically. And it's a lot harder to protect from, and I feel like it gives an advantage to carry mechs more than anything.
Okay, and actually one of the biggest things when that change came about was that now you are much more rewarded for doing micro after you perform a drop. So Smash, what do you think about the benefits after a drop? How and why, or should it even be rewarded to do additional micro after doing a drop, or should other things be prioritized and rewarded?
I'm totally fine with people like having the added fact of microing properly on outposts and fortresses and such to get added damage. My problem with it currently, which I haven't even had time to dig into really, even since I've started with all the other balance stuff I've been working on, is that it needs to be apparent to new players, people that don't know, not even new players actually, people that don't know it exists. There's no way for you
Agreed.
to know that it does more damage without someone actually telling you that it does. I mean, unless you're staring at the numbers and you pick up on it, but not something that someone's going to do when they jump into the game. It needs to be like in your face kind of thing. Like, okay, I know for sure that when it shoots, it does more damage. I don't care where it does it. It just needs to be really, really visible.
Yeah, I agree. When I remember when I first started, I knew about it, and so I started doing it for front door. And then people mentioned that, oh, it's very obvious because it flashes red instead of flashes white. And I didn't even realize that until someone mentioned it. And I knew that fact for months, that the front door, you know, when you attack the front doors, does double damage. I just never knew I just never realized that color flashed red. And like these kinds of indications, I don't think are enough. Just because the game is so fast paced, and you don't actually focus on things. Like when I was new, even recently, before the Moneymaker model change, I couldn't tell when moneymakers were on socket or off socket that they were pumping. You know, like they had that animation. Just because it's such a subtle animation.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah. Because you're not focusing on one thing on the screen at any real time in the game unless you're really, really, really focused on one thing, especially things that are minor like that in passing. So yeah, Big Boss, what do you think that mechanic of weak armor on corners actually adds to the gameplay?
Well, I would like to tell you this last week I was playing a 2v2 on Thaw. We managed to create a complete stalemate, you know. They had mid, but we had corners, so nothing was going to be happening, nothing pushing. It was going to be this either slowly creep or whatever. And Osprey Helix, over the course of 2 base drops, me and Belligerent Fool were able to completely win that game, purely through base drop, with corner micro, with being out carry mechs.
And, I mean, what does that tell you about what this mechanic does to gameplay, and if it's, I mean, do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing, or not even necessarily good or bad, but you know what I mean?
Well, the usage of 4 tanks, I feel that just that micro, it's kind of lame. That, like, it is kind of ridiculous how fast 4 Gemini at a corner, how much damage you can do. Especially if you get a mech kill and then go and try to go do your base drop, you can get just a ridiculous amount of damage in on those corners before they can even come back to the game, which is, I feel, kind of a negative, that you shouldn't be able to do that much damage that fast. I understand you don't want super long games where it takes forever to kill a fortress, but
I agree. The mechanic's a little too powerful.
I guess it has to do with sort of not necessarily risk versus reward, but I guess cost versus reward. How much time and money you put into those units and that trip and that extra effort, and how much you get out of it. It's probably a little bit imbalanced, I would say. Frisky, any other input for the weak spot mechanic?
I mean, in general, I don't like the mechanic because, I mean, one, it's kind of a hidden function. You know, once again, as Smash said, that it's really just something that you'd never know was there, and you're wondering, how is this person destroying my fort so quickly? I do prefer the decreased armor over double damage because, you know, once again, with hard-hitting units like tanks, it actually decreases the marginal benefit for things like that, whereas the units get bigger and stronger and harder to carry on and manage in micro, like things that could only really be shuffled around by a carry mech, you could just take 2 jackals as a striker or something, and that will still get you a decent amount of returns for your F if you can manage them well. And it doesn't necessarily have to be heavy units, but along the lines, yeah, you run into abuse of that. I prefer just not to have weak spots at all.
Yeah, I actually tend to agree with that. I never really liked the fact that a sort of random spot does more. I mean, it's not that terrible, but when they changed it to the corners, like the amount of surface area on the fort that was required to, or that you were pretty much required to block, it just became unmanageable to the point where it's a little bit crazy. I guess it kind of also boils down to fort defense, like how much upkeep and credits you allocate to fort defense versus to main battle forces, and it also kind of boils down to socket placement and quantity of sockets around forts on different maps. It's sort of a compounding problem. Hopefully we can alleviate that a lot with map editor.
If dropping does more damage and you don't have a lunchbox, the game has a very hard time limit that's completely dependent on your ability to outdrop your opponent. I don't like drop-centric games.
Ha! Other topic. That's
actually why I favor duel.
Yeah, another topic. That's another topic. Alright guys, we're going to move on to Playstyle Mentalities, which is meta versus non-meta styles. So guys, the metagame. Friendships turn to rivalries, debates turn to flame wars, and love turn to hate are all consequences of conflicting views regarding the meta. Disagreements over which playstyle is the right playstyle have ruined lives. Although this is a slight exaggeration, we all know how it feels to be either on the giving or receiving end of imbalanced units or tactics that are generally looked down upon. The Big Boss, what is your philosophy regarding the ideal playstyle, and how do you view those who go either with or against the standard metagame?
I feel the winning is kind of usually what I've been going for, so I usually do go for the metagame. Probably not the most of a lot of people don't appreciate that. I know a lot of people who rage at you in chat after that, but personally, I feel a lot worse losing a game than I do having somebody rage at me, so I feel that prioritizes on that win. So I feel anything I can find that's going to give me an advantage, I'm going to use. Admittedly, some things feel a lot cheaper than others have. I thought Jackos were kind of fun, whereas I really did not like the recent assassin mechanic that was easily abusable.
I'm glad that crossed the line for you and it made you feel dirty. So
Actually,
Smash. Go ahead.
That was one advantage of. I did not. I just instead changed my play to strike flash bomber and just countered that instead.
Smash, what's your philosophy with meta versus non-meta in your playstyle?
Well, I'm not like crazy good, so mostly meta-centric. So I go outside the meta and everything. Like basically, what I do in terms of balance is I watch everyone's games and I start to remember how people play and what they use and why they use it. I copy it. After I copy it, I play it. I kind of try to figure out, understand why they do it that way, and then I try to find my own meta after that. But yeah, I don't know. Now, I'm mostly like a unit loadout, and I mean, if I go to late game, I'm screwed. But I find that light unit loadouts are a lot funner because you're able to spam unit faster. You can do like random little jackals and stuff like that. I mean, besides like the reduced jackal damage to fortresses and all that. But I feel that in the long term, between light and heavy unit loadouts in general should both be able to work kind of. Although Frisky is like the master of going outside the meta.
Yeah, that's why I kind of saved these other two guys for last. But a lot of people who are watching who might not be that experienced or aware, if you a popular practice when you are playing more of a lighter unit or less expensive, cheaper unit build, usually you at least save one loadout slot. I guess in 2v2 and 1v1, or team game versus 1v1 is also very different when it comes to this, but usually you kind of save one unit slot, at least for what a lot of people consider to be a credit sink, that you can dump a lot of your extra credits into, like a Goliath or something like that, or rollers or grinders, just a single one just to have for that kind of contingency if it goes to late game kind of thing. So, Frisky Cow, your philosophy on the meta style game?
Well, I feel I look on it like it's mostly abuse. Where I feel like once there's an established way to win. Like, this is how to play AirMech. If you want to game, if you want to be better than everyone else, then you have to do this. You have to do this unit. You have to maneuver it in this particular way. I don't like knowing that it's so well defined like that. That there is one solid, correct way to play the game. So I try to actively go against that and try to think of different things that are underloved or underused and try to find some way to make them work. Usually dabbling leads to my failure, but yeah, it's still fun. I think in general the ideal play style is where you can just use units because they sound fun and then just have fun with them. And just stop caring about win or lose, because then you're pressured into, oh, well, those Mortys are so powerful, I just use nothing but Mortys. And then the game just loses a lot of its fun, because when you think that the win is that important, and when you're trying so hard to win, and then the games become monochromatic, or you're always seeing the same thing over and over. There's variety, there's no diversity.
People always take they lose to, basically, is what I see. Anytime they lose to something, that's what they're going to take.
As a caster, I would tend to agree with the need for variety and doing different things. But as a player, well, I'll say so. Insomniac, you are probably the most mixed bag in this group of players when it comes to this topic. So why don't you continue what you were going to say?
Well, first off, I mean, in relation to what Frisky was saying, or actually Smash, people copy what they lose to, but that's not really the best thing to do. I mean, yeah, Smash says he watches other people's games, he learns from them, he tries what they're doing to see what their purpose is and whether it's good, and that's honestly the best way to learn how to play. But you have a lot of players who just see how they got beaten and copy it rote. Like Frisky was saying, it's very repetitive, it's very dull because it's all predictable. It's just like the artillery meta. You see a game on Twin Peaks, maybe like the ones that we had in tournaments, where you basically have someone takes the bottom outpost and they start building tank, hatchet, seeker, artillery, 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 seeker, 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 ratchet, 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 and a jammer in there somewhere or two. But people do that across multiple maps. And one of the things I myself like to do is pull out different loadouts, whether it's Oink Bomber, which is Beppo, with Repair Guardians and a lifesteal, or the light unit rushes and patrolling. I just feel like people need to be more creative. I've done a few creative things on different maps, but I'm not going to try and say that's the right thing to do. But I think doing something different than what everyone else is doing, it should be the goal for every player.
Oh, totally. If we're the micro of this style of game when you look at it in total. There's so many things that people have figured out and they just don't want to or won't because they take what works at the time being, kind of thing. Whereas if we had the player base of anything to, even Infinite Crisis, it'd be crazy to what people would pull out of the hat when they actually put their ingenuity into it.
And I think similar to a lot of discussions of this nature, it'll probably, if we just keep going and talking and delving into it, we'll probably devolve into another discussion about map and unit control, which is one of the things that we're not going to know till later, until more time and effort can be put into it, and that's definitely understandable. Just right now, I think because of the state of the way that you can, or lack thereof, control your units, and the little nuances of every single map that everyone's incredibly familiar with by now, especially the veterans who have played it for 2+ years. The meta has kind of stuck with this same sort of stagnant artillery oriented, leapfrog oriented play. Obviously not on every single map. There's a lot of creative play that can be used on certain maps like Crater Sandrum that are really nice, but you know, mid OP everybody.
No, I have to agree. Yeah, I mean, it's with everything you said, but I have to reiterate and non-meta and win. I've taken lots of beatings from people who play standard, and I will try different min-maxing stats that people don't usually do, and different unit combos, or if you've seen the opening I use on duel sometimes where I attack both outposts at the same time, like those are effective things that do work in 1v1s and team games. And yes, they rely on the element of surprise, but overall I think there's a lot of possibilities that people just don't appreciate.
Yeah, I mean,
Mass turtle.
Well, just the question is turtle fun? And honestly, sometimes I'm probably the only one that'll say this. Do on occasion enjoy the artillery war. I mean, the dual artillery war is a dynamic thing. It is moving. It does take a lot of skill to pull off, and it's enjoyable if you're in that mindset. Occasionally, obviously, you're not in the mood, and you're just like, man, I wish I could push something, and that just doesn't happen on duel. But it can be enjoyable. You can't say Leapfrog is just the worst and it's playable.
no, I agree.
The reason I hate artillery war is because I bad at it.
Yeah, and I'm also terribly bad at it. I think actually, you probably weren't really around for this, boss, but one of the things that actually, in my opinion, sort of lessened the fun of artillery war is the jammer. And once the hard counter, once the jammer was put into play, the effects of it changed over time, and now it's been said as a deflection unit for a while. But artillery war kind of turned into a different type of thing that was more sustain versus flank, and that was actually one of the things that I did kind of like with artillery war. I was never really good at it because it was heavily micro oriented, and I was never good at playing Osprey type of gameplay. But I mean, that's also one aspect to it also, because a lot of people just aren't good at that type of micro. You typically don't enjoy what you're not good at, what you're bad at. So but before we move on to the next topic, I just wanted to mention that this mentality of, oh, I need to win, or versus I need to, or like, let's just have fun. We really shouldn't think negatively or anything like that. Look down on anyone who plays to win, because that's what playing a game like this, competitive game like this is. The objective is to win the game. If you have fun doing that in the process, then that's great. If you want to have fun, then that's your choice. But the goal of games like this, like games like AirMech, StarCraft, anything like that, is to win the game. So and playing the game to win is actually playing the game in general. So figuring out how to be victorious is actually also part of playing this game. So that's just my opinion on it.
There's always some
I
satisfaction
don't think
to
you're
get from getting people
playing
to
the
a bloody
game if you're
pulp.
not having fun.
And if you're not artillery war, you're not having fun.
There you go.
Plus
See,
it's one.
so there you go. Different takes, different perspectives. All AirMech vets. So before we move on to the next topic, Carbon Smash is going to have to depart from this discussion right now. So I just want to thank you, Smash, for joining us until now, and hopefully we could get you on in the future.
For sure. I'll probably be down to be on next if you have an open spot. So as long as I don't have soccer.
All right, cool, man. Thanks again for joining us, and everybody check him out on Twitter and all that stuff. And he posts on the forums all the time and helps develop the community and helps with. Well, he's a dev, so he's a dev.
All right, later, guys.
All right, see you, Smash.
Yep.
Okay, guys, we are gonna move on to the next topic. If my PowerPoint will respond. Alright, there we go. And it is going to be the new rotation between 2v2 and 3v3 matchmaking. So, the AirMech matchmaking system was implemented in late 2012, and besides a brief period that experimented with opening queues for every possible combination of formats, if you guys remember that was insanely ridiculous, the only team format available for a very long time was 2v2. Since then, there have been a few stretches of 3v3 with a little bit of back and forth to 2v2, and each change has lasted a good amount of time per run. Recently, the available team format has been switching between 2v2 and 3v3 every few days, or even sometimes a little more often than that, consequently increasing variety and lowering consistency. And this was actually going to be directed to Smash, but since he's gone, I'm gonna give this one to Insomniac. Oh, okay, go ahead, Big Boss. I'm gonna finish the prompt real quick. How has this change up affected your matchmaking experience and the player base as a whole?
I was actually at a point really kind of just bored of 2v2 and was kind of feeling for 3v3, and I had asked James in chat if he'd be willing to open up 3v3. And that was one of the first. I can't claim that it was me that asked for this, but I know about 10 to 30 minutes later, 3v3 came on and 2v2 went off for the first time this kind of happened. So I was super looking for 3v3 as it just was not being in matchmaking at all. And so it kind of started that happening in matchmaking, as before you would wait and matchmake 3v3 for hours and not get anybody. So it was really fun to have the 3 back, and I've kind of really been enjoying rotation personally.
Insomniac, how's it affected your experience?
Well, as a horrible teammate and 1v player, mostly it hasn't affected me too much, but when I do play team games, and I still do regularly play team games, I find that the rotation between 2v2 and 3v3 is overall a good thing, because it changes it up. People get too used to one game mode versus another in the matchmaking, and it kind of makes things stale, or people get tired of it, so they stop queuing. But I feel like having one not available while it is available makes people always want the other one. So when 2v2 comes back after 3v3 is done, people start hopping in queue more because they want to do 2v2. And that's about it. I kind of love it right now.
And Frisky.
I love the rotation. But between 2v2 and 3v3, I'm terrible at 1v1, so pretty much any time I play, it's 2v2 or 3v3. And I like to do random a fair amount, but 3v3 tends to be my favorite, but most of the maps in the pool aren't really conducive to 3v3. They kind of stagnate, and there's a lot of artillery war, not a lot of pushing, or if you do try to push, then there's so many mechs that units just evaporate in seconds. So, but if you have new players, they're a lot more willing to play large team games because, if I suck, it won't make as much of a difference because I have 2 teams rather than just one who's going to berate for being bad at the game. So you tend to see a lot more new faces in random 3v3, whereas 2 tends to be a little more tight-knit, a little more intimidating, but at the same time, games tend to flow a lot better. So
yeah,
I like the rotation.
Also with 3v3 coming back, but like just being pretty popular on a steady basis, you do end up with a lot of different more different people. When it was 2, usually you have 1 or 2 friends that you just hop into the queue for hours on end and just keep playing games. But with 3v3, since you do need those extra players, you end up generally either playing with other faction mates that you don't often get to play with as much, or you might be willing to invite somebody on your friends list that you aren't familiar with. So that's kind of been really fun. I've been enjoying.
Yeah, it's a pretty cool thing. One thing, I personally really do like the rotation. It's something that I've actually, not just me, but several people over the course of the last, I don't know, 1.5 to 2 years, have just mentioned, why don't we just have it on rotation? Why don't we change it? This and that, because usually it was like a month or 2 at a time of one of the formats. But now it is very nice to have a nice change of pace. The only thing with how often it is happening is it's just really hard to kind of keep up. Like, you don't really know what you're going to be doing each time you log in for matchmaking. If they had some sort of regular way that they rotated it, it would be nice if it was something like weekly or every 3 days, some sort of something that we could actually grasp onto. One of the common complaints before, when we either had one format or the other, was, well, I have 2 other friends and now we can't play in the same game together if we're gonna queue up for matchmaking, or oh, it's just me and my friend, we don't have a third person, so it's hard for us to find a game, and when we do, we just get a random noob and we lose. So there's definitely, it's obviously the kind of one of the go-to things to refer to is the size of the player base. Like, if the player base was a little bit bigger, these problems wouldn't really exist. We would be able to support both formats, but as of now, I really do like the rotation to be able to switch up the kinds of play that you do. I mean, 2v2 and 3v3, well, we're going to get into this in the next topic, but you know, they are, even though it's just an addition of a single player, it is a very different game. And just because you have a much smaller role in 3v3, you have a significantly larger role in 2v2. You might not be able to feel that in the lower tiers of the game, but once you get to higher tier play, you can really feel how the difference between 2v2 and 3v3 is, especially with how much you can actually contribute versus how much you need to rely on your teammates. So,
also the discussion of a skill. If they did want to actually come up with a set schedule of when they're going to have 3v3 and when they're going to have 2v2, if they're going to keep like this, I would definitely want it to be like based every 3 or 4 days. I would not want it to be something like weekends are 3v3s, Friday, Sunday are 3v3, and midweek is 2v2, as a lot of us, you know, midweek maybe you can play more, but then once you're off, busy doing stuff all and partying with other things, so it would be, definitely would not, I wouldn't want it to all be on weekends and then not weekends, or something like that.
Oh yeah, I definitely agree with that, because you know, a lot of people actually are kind of only available on certain days of the week. They can only play on weekends, or they can only play on Thursdays and Tuesdays or something like that. So we would definitely need to switch up the days for which is available on which day. I think that would be a good thing. We can't have something like what Big Boss says, where specific days are actually assigned certain formats. If we had an odd number of days or something like that, it rotates, or a weekly thing, something like that, it would be very nice. And if they should decide to do that, probably post it in game somewhere would be splendid. Alright guys, let's move on to the last preset topic, which is going to be format preference, 1v1, 2v2, and 3v3. So all players view the game through different eyes. Some are diehard 1v1 players and believe it is the truest form of the game. Others consider teamwork to be the most important factor of AirMech and think that 3v3 is the best way to experience the game. Many are in between these extremes, preferring 2v2 action to achieve a good balance between the importance of individual play and team play. Lastly, there are the all-rounder AirMech players that love every format for what it is and plays all the games they can get. What does each format bring to the table in your experience, and which format do you think best represents AirMech in your eyes? Frisky. Oh no, hold on. Yes, Frisky.
Me or me?
It's you. It's you.
Your mind, man.
It's you, man.
Okay,
what do you think
anyway.
between the formats? Dang it.
My preferred format is 2v2. I feel like that represents AirMech on the whole the best, where 1v1 for me is really high stress. It's really, every tiny mistake has huge consequence. If you die and you're on the bench for 10 minutes, then things of your stuff will be gone when you respawn. Your attention is a huge resource, as you can only be in one spot on the screen at a time. So if the tactics in 1v1 change to reflect how people can only be in one spot at one time, so instead of microing and supporting push, it's actually trying to find places to put units where other people won't be able to react to it in time. Where 2v2, I feel like have enough attention, but because mechs are powerful things on the field, it's no longer overpowering the units, where 3v3 becomes more logistics battle rather than tactical. I think 2v2 kind of strikes the best balance there.
Big Boss?
I certainly play all game modes. Generally, I'll have about an hour and a half between most of my classes a day. So midday, I'll usually be playing 1v1, just because I'm at school and internet can drop on occasion. So in 1v1, I don't want to affect my teammates. I don't affect anybody like that. Worst thing I can do is give somebody a win right away, so that's not that big of a deal if my internet drops. But then when I'm at home, I like to do the 2v2 and 3v3 a lot. I know I prefer 3v3. It's something I feel is a lot of fun, good for the faction to all play together and such. Right now I have to say I'm pretty sure that the most common 3v3 map is Twin Peaks, which I'm pretty sure everybody has an opinion on that. I mean, if you like Artillery Wars, 3v3, that's a terrible place to play it. It's too small.
I will comment that Twin Peaks is better in 3v3, I feel, than 2v2. Just because of the way that...
But it's actually the best 1v1 map. That's 1v1 map by far. So I like...
Go ahead.
Well, I feel that a lot of people do say that, like, certain maps are only for certain, like, game modes. A lot of people feel that they want all 1v1 maps to be small, all 3v3 maps to be the really large ones. But there have actually been a lot of... Because we can now vote on what map we get in the 3v3 pool or the 2v2 and 1v1, there has been a lot of diversity. Admittedly, some things feel broken, like having Veil in 1v1, but there have been some thing in games, like, to be honest. I have Veil in 1v1 broken, but it is on occasion fun, assuming both of you have similar loadouts that are conductive to the map and can enjoy it.
Insomniac? Are you there, Insomniac?
Yeah, I'm a one addict. Win, lose, or whatever. I have a lot of fun playing 1v1. It's very stressful, I agree, but I believe it's the most fun because you don't feel guilty when you screw something up because you have no teammates to get mad at you or worry about. I think it's mostly mental where, yeah, like Frisky said, it's on you if something screws up and goes bad, but it's also on you when something goes bad because you did something and then your teammates have to pay for it. And I feel like 1v1 is the most freeing you can be when you play back to the meta versus non-meta. I'm not someone who enjoys mid-fights and artillery wars, so therefore I'm a bad teammate. Too great at being all over the place.
You are cutting it a little, you're in and out a little bit, Insomniac.
While
you
the mid-fight's going on.
Your carry skill. Sometimes you can be a good teammate.
Not so great, but depending on the response from the enemy team, I can draw all 3 mechs from the enemy team away from the mid-fight and give my team time to maneuver or accomplish. And I feel like that's one of the things I enjoy most about the team games is, especially if you have a voice chat like Mumble or something, you can coordinate with teams and you can do great things with actual voice communication. But when you're playing normal with no voice chat, they don't know what the hell I'm doing ever. And sure, I can distract people and whatever, and I might dance around as a paladin for like a full 20 seconds while 3 mechs are trying to...
Okay, I think... Yeah, so I don't think he can hear us right now. Insomniac, are you there?
Kill me.
Yeah, so I think his settings.
Or if you're going randoms. But for the most part, I enjoy the 1v1 the most. I think it's the highest skill level, whatever you can base skill level off of is, I mean, yeah, Rex as a champion for a tournament, say what you will, but Rex has a lot of skill. So, I mean, he can play standard. He crazy. I certainly played crazy against him. I really enjoy playing against the highest tier players in the game in 1v1s. I feel like that's where the challenge is, because if you're not playing against someone who can beat you even, then it's not fun any longer. It's like playing against the AI. So that's where I'm at, is I'll play against the top players. I'll test my own skills out, whether I play standard or most of the time I don't play standard. It's still fun to make high tier players chase me around the map and screw with them, basically.
One thing I think should be said about 1v1, do enjoy 1v1, but I have to admit I generally stick to 1v1 on Smurfs and custom games, because 1v1 is...
Why Smurf?
Well, this is gonna sound terrible, but 1v1 is on your win-to-loss ratio, and that sounds terrible. I understand, that sounds like the saddest thing anybody can say.
That makes you such a bad person.
Yes, it does, but my win-loss ratio is terribly affected if I play 1v1, and if I play it on Smurfs, I enjoy it a lot more.
See,
Okay.
that's where I stopped caring about win versus loss ratios and stuff like that. My ratio is still pretty decent, but compared to people who smurf and people who snipe in matchmaking because the player base is small enough to snipe people, my ratio isn't awesome, but I feel like I'm up in with the higher tier players, at least in the 1v1s.
Wow.
You should try smoking though. It is kind of fun in 1v1.
You should just hop into rank 3v3 and see how high you can maintain win-loss while being paired with like level 7s every game.
I
Wow.
have smokes with terrible loss ratios. I can tell you that they do that, but it's not that fun.
Okay, let's stay on this. I guess it's kind of on topic, but I'm gonna go back to the concept behind the different formats. I personally think that 3v3 is the truest way to play AirMech because it is a team game. A lot of people refer to AirMech as a MOBA, and we, all know better. It's very different from traditional MOBA type games, but it does imply the same type of teamwork necessary. And here's the thing: I think the best format, and this is an opinion, I think the best current format in AirMech is 2v2, just because most maps cater better to 2v2 play. Even large maps like Thar and to a certain extent Crater and Sandrum, but yeah, they really suit 2v2 play very well. I mean, obviously, and I do agree with the big boss in saying that a lot of people do consider that 1v1, 2v2, and 3v3 have their own kind of map sets that that facilitate those formats, gameplay types better. And yes, I actually think that as well. But I know that a lot of people have played great games on on other maps that aren't typically considered standard for those formats, and there's a lot of proof on my channel because I have casted 3v3s on Nestthorn, 3v3s on Dust, 1v1s on Sandrum. So in not saying it doesn't happen, it definitely has, like, every game has the potential to become an incredibly good game, but that it just doesn't happen nearly as often, not even close to as often as good games on maps that people tend to consider better for 2v2, for example, Thar, Duel. Duel, a lot of people consider that across the board. I'll reserve my opinion for a more map-specific topic, but yeah, Veil is the obvious choice for 3v3. Sometimes it's terrible. Sometimes it's hilarious in 1v1 or 2v2, and it's awesome. So, but I'm just saying the majority of the time, for a typical AirMech game, especially for typical exciting AirMech games, they will mostly happen on maps that I personally consider to be 2v2 maps, which is almost every single map in the map pool, except for the glaringly obvious. Bonjubon did copy-paste something from Spore Freak. I haven't screened it, but I will read it right now. And he said, "What I don't like about 3v3 is that everybody sticks together, making mechs die almost instantly. I might enjoy it if I could actually get some people to play with me often. I'm in person, not over the internet. I might enjoy it, I guess." Also, Spore Freak might want to try, mumble voice chat of some kind with people that you actually know. But yeah, I think that also does boil down to maps, because you don't necessarily see that as much in maps like Crater and Veil, but you will see it more in maps like Duel or Chasm, even when it's very mid-centric and focused on mid. Go ahead.
Well, Freak is a huge 1v1er. He's a great 1v1er. Then he is kind of weak on 3v3. Things out that it's because he doesn't have actual play with. As a lot of you know, I have my brother. He's like 20 feet behind me right now. We play almost the large majority of 2v2s together, and that is such a huge advantage to have that communication, especially in team games that do get mech kills way more, when you can communicate and say, "Hey, I got this guy down to 1/3 life, and the Helix come and take him out on the ground." That's a huge advantage in the 2v2 and 3v3.
And I do want to comment that kind of communication can, just because you're in person doesn't mean that the same, or at least comparable levels of communication can't be achieved just through voice chat programs like Mumble or Skype. So if you guys haven't tried it, you guys should. It really increases the experience for team games, and a lot of people that I've played with.
And it's free.
Oh yeah, it's free. And oh, by the way, anyone can use the Grizzly Wing Mumble server. We have a guest lounge that you will automatically be dropped into, and you can move into certain open rooms, or just ask one of us to move you into a locked room. And you know, the more time you spend in here, the better we know you, and we could, you know, put you on more trusted lists and stuff like that. But yeah, our Mumble is open to everyone. I think the address is in my channel description right now, and it's in our group description. It's in every kind of forum post that I've made for a tournament. So if you need somewhere to go, if you need a server to use for Mumble, I mean, there's a lot of free ones out there, but the Grizzly Wing Mumble is definitely open for anyone in the AirMech community to use for voice chat. And we are already 8 minutes over, so I think right now, unless anyone has something specific to contribute, I'm going to move on to viewer questions.
I have to contribute the fact that I have to leave you, unfortunately. I do want to agree with you, though, that 2v2 is the best representation of AirMech. But I have to exit now.
All right, Insomniac, thank you for joining us, and everybody make sure to say thanks to Insomniac and visit his YouTube page and his AirMech Outpost website.
All right, thanks. See ya.
See you, Insomniac. All right, so we will move on to viewer questions. We will move on to the viewer questions, and the first one is from Fat Asian Beast, which is about the Neo. So most mechs have straightforward press X to 4Y to happen type abilities, while the Neo requires more timing and positioning to make the most use of its abilities. This skill discrepancy hurts the Neo as a whole. It can even be called underpowered in the current meta. Up to debate, definitely an opinion. How can the Neo be buffed or changed so that the skill level required to play it effectively is equal or closer to other mechs? And that was supposed to go to Insomniac. So right now I'm going to go to Frisky. I personally, I personally agree with Fat Asian's view on the skill. I guess the skill required to play it effectively. How do you see it?
Well, I would agree that Neo is more of a high skill mech now, but I mean, if you wanted to put it on par with the other mechs where it's not quite so high skilled, most air mechs, you use your special ability by holding right click, like Sword and Shield or Missiles or Air to Ground or what have you. And Neo's cloak is hard to maintain. It's really a kind of energy to hold, and you can't get anything when you're cloaked either. It's very, very difficult to keep up. I would say if you want to do that, just cloak. You can make cloak consume less energy, last longer, and that would buff Neo. It would add a lot of variety to gameplay, where you can pull off drops or maybe hide pushes or drop things where people wouldn't expect things to drop.
Boss?
Well, he kind of brings out that he wants Neo to be. He's asking, how could we make Neo be so it's almost easier to play? I almost feel that kind of defeats. We're gonna make a change to Neo that makes it easier to. Gonna be making it just closer to Striker. You're probably gonna get it even a little more armor or a little more damage in the air, and I just those kind of changes aren't really in line with what you want Neo. That it kind of just the way it's set up, stealth and crazy high speed with low armor is just gonna kind of always be kind of a high skill and harder thing to pull off than something like Helix that has the high armor, high speed, low medium speed, but acceptable speed, good damage. So I just feel the way Neo's set up, you have to completely redo and rethink what Neo does. You're gonna make it easier to play.
Yeah, Neo is not really so much of a dogfighting mech as more of kind of a carry and sort of like swoop in and finish people off sort of thing.
I've seen different aspects of the Neo. I mean, through the course of the ever-changing game that is AirMech, it's been considered overpowered, underpowered, heavily used, barely used, and it really does vary on the state of the game. Right now it's very, very different than it was 2 years ago when Neo was considered to be the best mech just because of speed, and infantry spam was so effective that the fastest, the mech that could vary infantry from one spot to the other the fastest was the most powerful. That's almost irrelevant nowadays. It's frequently very much about power, but you do you do see Neo a lot more in larger maps and 3v3s in larger maps and even 2v2s on larger maps, and I think that might be the key, the core, where Neo holds a lot of its power in the ability to get from point A to point B incredibly quickly. So how do we increase the, not necessarily increase, but I guess how do we make that factor more important in AirMech in general? One obvious thing is just to have bigger maps, but I think okay, this is kind of turning into a sort of general Neo balance rant for me, but I guess if you want to compare it to another mech, which is the Warthog, it's kind of completely the opposite. But one thing that James says that he tells all new players to do is, if they ask what the best mech is, and we all know that that's not a real question, but the easiest way to answer that to people who don't really understand the game that well is Warthog. It's very straightforward, it's very strong, it's very powerful. The Neo doesn't have very strong guns, doesn't have very high armor, so you die fast, you don't kill units very quickly, so it's much harder to understand how to utilize the Neo. I do agree that the cloak is very difficult to use. The efficiency for the cloak is even a little bit low, and as a lot of people might notice, very underused in high tier games. It's pretty much only used as a getaway tactic after you land. So I think if we do increase maybe the general efficiency, energy efficiency of cloak, and possibly change its mechanic when being struck, because a lot of people really hate how fast energy is drained when you are hit with while you are using cloak as a Neo, and I actually have never really liked that. Also, that's sort of a mechanic that I saw change, because previously it would just kind of do nothing, like there was no real penalty. I personally think a better way to go about the mechanic is to force the Neo to decloak, but not cost it energy, but just basically force it to decloak and not allow it to recloak until a certain cooldown time has passed. So, you know, if you can contact the Neo, your reward should be being able to see the Neo instead of basically being able to cripple the Neo completely. And I think that would make a lot of sense, personally. It probably won't do that much to low levels of the, you know, lower level players in terms of contributing to their ability to use the Neo, which is a little bit unfortunate. I don't really have a direct answer for that besides help new players understand the game better, and therefore it'll be easier to use the Neo.
I feel like part of the crippling energy drain when you shoot a Neo, you know, for bombing run circles, where when bombs were really popular and you would just constantly go around in circles and circles and circles, pick up more bombs, pick up more bombs, drop more bombs. You're invisible the entire time. The outpost regen was a lot higher too.
Yeah,
that might just be a relic from old days where you're trying to keep that sort of constant unlockable damage output from being sustainable.
Yeah, and that was one of the, I guess, yeah, Neo has been indirectly nerfed frequently just because a lot of the tactics that was very popular and powerful for a lot of Neo play, such as constant cloak bomb dropping, has been nerfed directly because bombs are not nearly as strong as they used to be in previous patches. So yeah, it's one weird, unfortunate thing that's happened to Neo. Go ahead.
Well, you would just, probably what you were about to say, but bombs really need to be dropped in groups in mid-wall, because that's what I'm used to. I'm going to talk about. In a mid-wall, you need to be dropping, assuming this is semi-developed, you need to be dropping at least 3 to 4 bombs to be getting anything done. So Neo, even late game, is maxing at 2 bombs, I believe. So even if it did have those stealth bombing runs, it's really hard to get anything done with 2 bombs, right? So that's why you see your Osprey or your Helix is doing your 4 bomb runs over and over again, and that's useful. Whereas I imagine a Neo, even if it was cloaked and kept doing 2 bomb drops on my dual artillery mid-wall, it's really not going to have that huge of an impact, and it's 2 bombs can't really kill much right now.
Yeah, that's a good point. One of its main roles has actually been taken away, and in more than one ways, not just carry. I think that you know, one of the biggest benefits for Neo cloaking in for bombs is the fact that you don't know it's coming in. You cannot focus it down. Previously, mech DPS was much higher. I don't remember exactly when it changed. It was something like 8 months to a year ago. Mech DPS was decreased by definitely a noticeable amount to make high tier players complain like crazy. But previously, especially in team games, you could easily focus down most mechs trying to come in for a bomb run. And I mean, I know this discussion is kind of revolving around a single unit, which is kind of bad and broken to begin with, but this is just how everything did happen. You would kind of just get yourself killed if you didn't do huge, wide-arcing bombing runs, whereas Neo could almost come directly in, maybe kind of from the side, but because of its speed, it was okay. It wasn't that big of a deal. And yeah, it just was not... And Bonjibon says he thinks any mech carrying bombs should have a hard-coded airspeed decrease. You really do love the word hard-coded now, don't you? Could work, could work.
Also, A's and Tempest just brought, actually a while up, but brought out a really good point that its main ability that's used right now is Stasis.
Right.
And that is arguably not super effective at... Well, it's very situational when it's effective. If they have some infantry multi-spam that you just catch, it's very useful, whereas... in the mid-wall, it's not very useful, whereas Helix missiles, things like that, can really do a lot of damage, whereas Stacy really does not.
Yeah, actually, that I think, now that you bring that up, it does remind me of another indirect nerf to Neo, which is the sort of the shift in the meta. Previously, it was very credit and tank spam heavy. Now it's kind of reverting back into more of a stagnant artillery oriented game on the majority of maps, and because you just have less units moving in, the stasis slowdown ability is not that effective. Frequently it was used to either slow down or even split up pushes while teammates prepared or while you bomb, and that's another thing that's... So I mean, Neo has, after discussion and further consideration, yeah, I mean, there's been a lot of indirect and semi-direct things. I guess that's also kind of indirect, semi-direct. But yeah, Neo has been nerfed in several ways, in small increments over time, and yeah, let's get. You guys are right. We should probably move on. But thanks, Fat Asian Beast, for that question. All right, our next one is from Blast Bits. Oh, I forgot to change the color of his name. Anyway, so how can PvP be promoted over co-op? Was AirMech meant to be a co-op game at all? Big Boss.
I would feel that the real reason that I don't think that you could really encourage PvP over co-op with things like kudos or XP boosts. I really don't think that that's really actually that tempting of a thing, especially if I know I'm not going to enjoy that game. But if I know those rewards I can only get, I've thought about this for a while, but been thinking about this all day, and really the only thing that would really convince me that I want to keep playing PvP rather than co-op is that if there was significant items that I wanted that I could only be getting from PvP, would be pretty... That would help encourage PvP, I feel. If there were things that you have to get, like things similar along the lines of Cardinal Bird, maybe not following the ELO format, there's a lot of complaints about that, but something following those lines that you'd be getting from only PvP.
Frisky?
I think there's a handful of mechanics in place right now that encourage people to lean more towards co-op than PvP. I mean, one, it would be just ladder anxiety of, playing against people is more stress, there's more on the line, it's harder, it's more intimidating. But I think another big thing is that, it's kind of the same deal, is that it tends to be easier to be AI, and so when you're doing co-op, you're not necessarily playing co-op, you're playing AirMech, and that's how you have fun. It's also the grind aspect, where I really want this kind of unit, play this many games where I can unlock that unit, because kudos. But PvP games take like half an hour each, whereas I can finish a co-op game in
Also, I feel a certain kind of player has to be targeted. Right now, a lot of the people I feel that are like the ones similar to me that are in PvP matchmaking, that are just full-on playing meta that want to win. Yes, we're stereotyping, but they generally would be male teenagers, and so if that group of people was targeted more, so now obviously there's not really any advertising for AirMech right now, but if that group was kind of hit and pushed a little more, I think we'd have more useful people in the community. Like, imagine if we had like 80 UXs running on Matchmake, would just be the best.
Oh man, I don't think you're going to hear that phrase uttered too often, but would be interesting to see. I definitely
handle
agree.
that much troll.
Yeah, I mean, this question has been tossed around over and over and over again, for a very long time, and I mean, I don't have, there haven't been many really different answers over in-game rewards for playing PvP. Maybe promote more, more rewards, more kudos and EXP and all that stuff, but none of it really does seem to work. What everyone's saying is definitely the problem, which is the player base, and everyone always gets stomped, noobs get stomped, blah blah blah. And also, what Frisky did mention is just the stress of playing against another human being. There's a lot, why not just play co-op? It's not that bad. You still have a lot of fun. I think people need to experience it more. When I started playing, it was more, I mean, there weren't so many good players. I played a lot of people my skill level or even lower sometimes when I got into the game after a few weeks or months. And unfortunately, I mean, I guess it might boil down to the matchmaking algorithm is probably, I mean, I don't really want to comment too much on it because none of us actually know exactly what it does and exactly how it pairs us, but that the frequent imbalance of matchups, I mean, it does definitely boil down to what the algorithm, how the algorithm decides to pair everyone up. And yeah, unfortunately, we just don't have enough information to really give useful feedback, I feel. Alright guys, so let's, unfortunately, because just for time, I'm going to skip the next question for the panelists. You can see that on the doc. But the last question is from Dudio Bugtron, actually an Xbox to PC convert. So, using and defending against AoE units such as Morty, Boomer, Artillery, Bomb, and Heavy Mine definitely requires a certain skill level in Micro to execute. How do you think these units, which have the potential to be the most destructive or game-changing, affect the enjoyment of PvP for players with less Micro experience? Frisky.
I think these are exactly units that end up as meta units. These are things that are very definitely arguably broken, that are too easy to use with too strong effects. If you have lots of skill, lots of Micro, and I can just drop more Heavy Mines, completely obliterate your push in a few seconds. Is that me being good, or is that just a unit that's introduced to the game that just raises skill ceiling a little bit more, that just things more stalemating, monochromatic? I think the subject matter of this question is moot, as Boomer, Mortys, bombs, flamers, mines are all have changes that just about everybody wants to see made to make them feel more fair.
Yeah, the way you have to deal with units is very unfun. Like the way you'd have to set off manually heavy mines, the way you have to pick up all your tanks and healing units and start repairing them, bring them to your outposts and stuff, that gets really old. But I mean, I can't really imagine how you, without just straight up like removing something like heavy mines or giving it back the old ability to just walk over them, it's kind of hard to remove those kind of annoying Micro intensive aspects of the PvP game.
I mean,
I think it's the fact that countering it requires so much Micro that people are inclined to say it's broken.
Well, it's also a little bit frustrating, and some people love Micro, and I won't deny that sometimes Micro is definitely fun. For me, I enjoy certain kinds of Micro over others. Usually it has to do with the kind of Micro that I either support with my mech on the ground, or that supports my mech while I'm using it. Every unit that he listed actually is a little bit funny. They're all very, very low risk. Morty, Boomer, Bomb, and Heavy Mine are all disposable for the way that they're used right now. So, for the people using them, there's no hassle, there's no stress involved really. You just put them down and use them. Artillery, similar situation where you put it in a position that is not at risk. You don't really need to put them close to an enemy line. They're designed to be out of range of typical army units like tanks and stuff like that. So maybe we can go ahead. Go ahead, boss. You can go.
Well, those units are definitely a big problem in 1v1 than 3v3 because you can't have that diversity. If the opponent takes heavy mines, is just in 1v1s, I can rarely fit in roller into my loadout. If I already had, say if I had, obviously I'm not allowed to even say this, but imagine if I had 16 loadout spots, I could easily fit in roller, and then dealing with the heavy mines wouldn't be that big of a problem in 1v1. Whereas
So I guess
right now, I don't have anything to stop heavy mine. The only option I have is to turtle forward and slowly set off your heavy mine, take all your outposts, and then not do anything until domination goes to you.
So the dialogue just now, I mean, it does really remind me of you know, the arguments for and against hard counters in the game with a limited set of loadout slots. And although a heavy mine is not necessarily a hard counter to anything, you do need to actually take specific sets of actions to counter, you know, their use, whereas a normal army unit like a tank or a seeker, it's not necessarily something that you need to specifically consider how to defeat that in a specific special way other than the normal way to deal damage to it. And I think that's probably one of the biggest sources of the, like, for example, bomb, you can't counter it except for killing the mech or moving your units out of the way or negating the damage with the healing units, stuff like that. So I mean, mechanically a lot of these are problems, the micro involved with defending against them versus using them is dramatically different. And yes, it's definitely going to be an incredibly frustrating experience for players who don't have the sort of necessary skill level of micro to avoid, you know, taking damage from all of these really, for the most part, easy to use units for the opponent. And yeah, it definitely detracts from the PvP experience when something that is like you are, you know, something that's like more fun to do, you know, to use your units instead of defending, you know what I mean? Like that it's just not a fun feeling and fun thing to experience.
Plus one.
Balancing ease of use to effectiveness. I don't really have that large of a problem with how easy they are to use, but I think the well, we'll get back to that in a future topic. I'll add that to the topic list, actually.
The police's video, how to not lose it. If you can just build one unit and one unit only and still manage to win or stalemate, it may be overpowering.
Yeah, I made a meme sort of based just sort of because of that, which is basically so you didn't want to lose all your units to bombs. Well, then instead of making units, you should have also built bombs. All right, so that's pretty much about it. Unless you, I mean, yeah, I guess we didn't really directly answer this question, but I mean, I guess we sort of commented sort of satirically on it. But yeah, one thing that I do want to mention, Big Boss, is heavy mines. Just is from yesterday. Heavy mines do not suck, but their current implementation does suck. I personally would like to see. I will say this directly. Heavy mines are wrong right now. They need to have a longer arm time. I personally, Insomniac has been saying 5-7 seconds. I personally think it should be much longer than that. Double that, something like that. I mean, obviously subject to balance and experience, like feeling how that arm time works. But I really think it should be a very long time, and this will become more apparent on large maps like Vale, Crater, Sandrim, and not just not just maps like Duel. So, yeah, the arm time has to go way the hell up. And I also don't like the primary way it's countered right now, which is just to basically stomp a unit on it and pick it back up before the heavy mine explodes. If it's easier implementing, then sorry, I would like to see that be able to be differentiated, and when you drop a unit on top of a heavy mine, it just explodes immediately, so that that it can actually separate those detonation criteria, or if it's easier to implement than that, just don't allow units that drop directly on the mine to set them off. Force them to be moving at, I don't know, at least 50% of its max speed, so you can't just drop a unit on Y and then pick it up again. The exact same thing. All right, how does that sound, boss?
I mean, that sounds good. I mean, if you're gonna make say like 30 seconds. I'm just thinking of this. It would kind of feels like it would defeat the purpose, say, like on Twin Peak. Obviously, it takes a very long time, but then on kind of makes more sense. But then again, if it's Unveil, I'm wondering if it was, say, more like a lot of the common suggestions are like the 7 to 10 seconds range of time. Unveil, that still could easily be used React. So I would agree with you that it has to be like something like 30 seconds for the larger maps, even.
That means after if someone clears your mines, like, okay, you have someone setting up a push at mid on Chasm or something, and so you have a big row of heavy mines, you're like, they might push, I'm going to set up some mines. This is not reactive. It takes them 30 seconds to arm. Okay, so now they're all armed. They send one zipper, detonate all the mines, then push. Okay, so your mines just got completely hard countered. You have no chance to replace any of them, not even the ones at your fort. I feel like, having such a long arm time just makes them way too easy to counter.
Yeah, obviously, I'm just saying it's subject to balance, but it needs to be a lot longer than it is now.
And that's also assuming your heavy mines completely in the open with no anti-air or later units as well to protect mines, which is obviously just one by itself probably shouldn't protect itself from everything else.
Okay, I think James has enough input. He's actually watching apparently, so I didn't really realize that until now. But yeah, hopefully something will be done soon enough. Also, James, please make Morty stop. Morty and Flamer stop having that what is it called? The damage on death? Is that what the splash damage on death? And increase the Morty cost. Those are the biggest problems I see right now. I know it's a vicious cycle of one thing gets nerfed and something else emerges as OP, but it's just become so extreme, I think, at this point that we need to just bite the bullet right now. We know what's going to happen again, but yeah. Alright guys, so yeah, I think that will conclude the 3rd episode of AirMech Talk. I want to thank the panelists that have left, Carbon Smash for joining us, and Insomniac 311. Carbon Smash the first time he was here. Hopefully he can join again. Yeah, the busy devs, busy lives. I definitely understand that. But first time here, the Big Boss, thank you for joining us. I want to comment, guys, that Big Boss has a stream every Wednesday. It does get hosted by OPTV Live, which is Steve's stream, and the OPTV Live network and all that. So thank you, boss, for coming. I hope you had a good time, and hope to see you sometime again soon. That was your cue to say something.
Was fun. Yep, was fun. Thank you. It was fun to be here.
All right, cool, man. And Frisky, as always, I did a curtsy in real life. No one saw that, unfortunately. Okay, damn you.
Webcams would be fun. I agree with you on that.
Alright, so thank you everyone for attending AirMech Talk. If you guys have any questions, you definitely could ask them in the forum thread. I forgot to assign someone specifically for catching any questions in Twitch chat. I'm very sorry about that. If anyone has anything that they did want to ask, please check the forum thread. If you don't know where it is, just go to Carbon Forums. If you don't have an account, make one. It's in under the community section. I will post one for next week, but if you have any questions that you'd like to ask before that, just post them in the current thread, and I'm completely fine with catching up. And if you'd like to be a panelist on AirMech Talk, I definitely could use more. Our regular panelists are happy to contribute, but I would like to have a nice mix of panelists come on, answer questions, and give their opinions on the different aspects of the game. And we'll have new, fresh topics every week, for the better or worse, I'm not sure, but we'll try to keep it interesting. Alright guys, once again, thanks for watching AirMech Talk, and have a good night.